We are live.
What's up, everybody? This is StoryHive on location in Vancouver with Vancity, Beats, Eats,
and more.
My name is Kazi, the host of this show. I am so excited to be introducing the wonderful Bisilida Redila. We've met recently, and getting to know you and your story, and that you are one of the first, unofficially undocumented but now documented, one of the first street dancers within our community. Bisilida Redila embodies the spirit of East Van through and through. Born and raised in a lively household where music and dance were part of everyday life, she's a proud Britannia grad and the daughter of one of Vancouver's first Filipino nurses. In the early 80s, she discovered breakdancing and became one of the city's first street and club dancers in an all-female crew called Scorpio, dancing on cardboard right on Granville Street. Her love for dance has never faded, from salsa congresses with her daughter to roller dancing inspired by Chicago's JB skate style. Now in her 50s, Bisilda is still learning, still moving, and still deeply rooted in East Van. Let's give a warm welcome.
Thank you, East Van.
I mean, we don't have many East Van originals anymore.
That is true. People are surprised when they find out that I was born here, and everybody's moved out.
I wasn't born here, but I consider myself an East Van original because I have been living here since I was 4.
Wow.
And knowing the markers and knowing what's been around here before all of this new come up.
For sure, yeah.
I think
you're an East Vanner, that's for sure.
I think the thing that really I found interesting when you sent me a bunch of facts on your bio was like that your mom was one of the first nurses to come here from the Philippines.
Yeah, she came to Vancouver, it was probably 1964. And she came here after she was actually, I think, the first, or maybe one of the first groups of international students to go study nursing at the Mayo Clinic in New York.
Okay.
So she went from the Philippines to study at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester. And then once that was finished, she was, most of them went back to the Philippines, but my mom didn't want to. Her visa expired for the US, so she crossed the border and came into Canada. And so there were a few of them that came together, and they ended up choosing Vancouver. And so, so back in 1964, they all lived together. They rented a house near the hospital and started a life here.
Wow.
So it wasn't about a year later, she sent for my dad, who was still in the Philippines. Like, they were childhood sweethearts. So he came over to Vancouver as well, and he finished his engineering degree at UBC. And that was the start of their life here in Vancouver.
Wow.
Yeah, the Filipino community, I think, was really, really small back then, because I remember even as a child, people at school not even knowing what the Philippines was. They'd ask me what I was, and I'd say Filipino, and they're like, what is that?
Yeah. Where is that?
They just, I always kind of just got assumed that I was Chinese, and as a kid, I didn't correct anybody. I was like, I'm Filipino, but...
What elementary school did you end up going to?
So I went to Queen Victoria for primary school. That's right off Victoria Drive.
Yeah.
And then I went to Grandview Elementary from grade 5 to grade 7. And then Britannia for high school, except one semester I did at Templeton, and then went back to Britannia. So.
Okay. I went to Windermere.
Okay.
Yes. So I'm as East Van as you can get before it becomes Burnaby.
Right.
But that area is so characterized by, at least when I was growing up, it was Filipino, Chinese, Vietnamese, East Indian, Fijian.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, definitely. Back in that time, so my high school days was 1980 to 1985. And even before that, it was East Van. I grew up on the Drive, so I went to Britannia. So the majority of, was Asian. It was probably 90% Chinese.
Whoa.
And, but all the other schools too, there was, it was East Indian, Italian, Chinese. I think those were the biggest minority communities. And in at Britannia, there was probably 2 other Filipino families maybe that had kids that went to Britannia. I think John Oliver, there was and Tupper were the bigger population, the Filipino community.
Yes.
So, J.O. and Tupper.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I have lots of fond memories, like going to different East Van schools for basketball
Yeah.
and volleyball and
me too.
sports. Oh man. And so then you grew up as a kid here in the 70s.
Yeah, I was in elementary school in the 70s. Well, actually, like I started grade 8 in 1979. So yeah, I grew up late 60s and all through the 70s in Vancouver, in the same house off Commercial Drive, off McSpadden Avenue. So
Oh yeah.
so I lived on McSpadden from the time I was 2 years old to the time I was, I think, 20. And many people came through our house. So like I mentioned, it was like a full house. When I remember everything by grades. So when I was around grade 3, my mom brought over her sister from the Philippines, and she had 7 kids. So all of a sudden, you know, like there was a lot of us in one house, and it was always, you know, our family loved music. My mom loved dancing. Everybody loved music.
What were they playing in the house at the time?
When I was little, my mom and dad would have parties, and that was like the salsa explosion, like end of disco, like disco / like the salsa explosion happened. And so there was a lot of disco and salsa played in the house. And then I had cousins who were older and like around in the 70s. So my cousin Eva, she was a disco dancer. So, you know, she would like Saturday mornings be cleaning the house, and we'd watch American Bandstand, or she'd put, you know, her music on and like teach me moves. Her partner would come and practice with her because she was like a disco queen back then. Like she was like, whatever the circuits were in the clubs back then, she would tell me, I think Daddy Longlegs was one of them. Probably a generation older than me would know the names of the clubs, but she'd bring trophies home. She was in the newspaper, and she was really good.
I'm so curious what the contests were like.
Yeah.
Then. Like, what is the
It was like
disco
Saturday
contest
Night
like?
Fever.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was all couple dancing, right?
Okay.
So couple dancing and like, you know, balancing on the shoulders and like twirling the girl around like a helicopter off the floor, and
Oh my gosh.
and just a lot of touch dancing, you know, all that stuff.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So I watched her as a kid, and she was my idol. I would be like, oh my God, you know, her doing her makeup and her dress and her outfit, practicing dancing with her partner. I was just like, I want to be that.
Oh my gosh. And so then how did you then become introduced to what we call now street dance and club dance?
I think I've always liked dancing. I was like painfully shy as a kid. But then when music came on, you know, I would dance until someone looked at me, and then I would stop. But I felt it. And I think it was just throughout just becoming more social and growing into myself as like a preteen and a teenager, listening to music with my friends, dancing on my porch, you know, making up little routines to like Sister Sledge, We Are Family, you know, doing that kind of thing. So that would be like, you know, in elementary school. Like I knew I loved dance. I knew I loved like making dances up and stuff like that.
Do you remember the first time you heard hip hop?
Yeah, it was the Sugar Hill Gang.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was the first one. That was probably in grade 8. And also like I got to listen to more music than what was played on the radio because one of my older cousins, he was a DJ. So he would throw parties, and you know, he had all the disco music, and then it started, you know, shifting more to, you know, popular music like Earth, Wind and Fire, and who else? You know, like Shaka Khan. You know, that era. Rufus. And so I would get to go to his dances because the party scene or the dance scene back then, to me, probably just because I was underage, was DJs throwing parties. They would rent like auditoriums or church halls and just throw parties and sell tickets. So because my cousin was a DJ, you know, I was in grade 7, I got to go and I got to like watch everybody dance and like pick up the dances that they were doing back then in the day, like in the disco, you know, the disco clubs. And that's when I fell in love with dance. And then it just carried on when I heard hip hop. It just really like resonated with me. I was like, I like this, right? And because back then it was, hip hop was very new, right? It was like, you know.
And to hear it like rapping, you know?
That was, that was different, that was new. And I always tell stories about how me and my friends and my family, like my cousins were my friends. They were also dancers, right? So we would go when that song came out, we'd have our ghetto blaster, put the batteries in, go down to Kids Beach and blast like Sugar Hill Gang.
Yeah.
And there would be all this, for some reason back then you had to pick a genre of music. You were either like a headbanger or you were disco or hip hop. Like, what is this rap? Like, no one really knew it back then. So, you'd play your music and people would turn that off, like there was actually battles. Like the first battles were like playing your music, not really dancing, just like the battle of the
sound system.
The battle of the sound system.
Oh my gosh. So is it that whoever played louder won? Whoever had the stronger sound system?
We usually did.
Yeah.
Because we usually had all the batteries, the big ones to carry on your shoulder, like typical. But, it was just like who had the biggest mouth.
Yeah.
Really.
Oh my gosh. And so then in terms of like the dance, like was it breaking that you saw first or popping? Or?
I saw a lot of, I did see popping and locking before I saw breakdancing, like actual on the ground breakdancing, because it would be on American Bandstand. It already existed as part of like the disco dances. So it wasn't until I don't even know where I saw breakdancing first. I think it was my little cousins who came to visit.
Yeah.
So I had cousins that came from Guam, and they weren't even teenagers. Like they were preteens or really young.
Yeah.
But they were breakers. And so me and my brother and my cousins, we were watching them. They had the baggy pants already with the belt, the white tank top. They were breaking on the floor, and we were like, teach us how to do that. So I think it was, younger kids that taught us at, 15, like what breaking was. And then, it started becoming, more visible.
Yeah.
We'd see a bit of it on TV or in movies and stuff like that.
Like breaking.
Yeah, but breaking. Yeah. We had already been introduced before the movies came out, so that's why we were so gung-ho when the movie came out.
Yeah.
Because we could actually see and like, you'd have to see the movie once in the movie theater, try to remember every move that you saw that you wanted to repeat because,
you couldn't replay it.
Yeah, we couldn't rewind, we couldn't replay. It's not like we, as kids, had money to keep going seeing the movie. Like, we would just kind of collaboratively, like, what do you remember? Oh, I think he did this, and I think, and just kind of like work it out on the cardboard and just play around and,
there's
just
so
have
much
fun with
freedom
it.
in that, where it's like whatever you don't remember, you end up find a pathway to create a move, essentially.
Like our interpretation of what we remembered, we saw, and it just worked, and we were just happy with that, just like, because we were finding something new. We were like creating something new, and although everything we do, we were trying to imitate what we saw, but it was like a really good time.
That's so interesting that breaking ended up going to Guam. Like Guam is like an island that is south of the Philippines, close to Australia?
No, it's in the South Pacific. So it's like near Micronesia, like near Hawaii, Tonga, all those like Micronesia islands. Yeah, South Pacific.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of history, like after the Spanish-American War, the U.S. bought the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico, all in the same 3-for-1 deal, apparently. Yeah. So there was such an influx of Americans, American culture, and also like the coming of the Filipinos. I don't know if a lot of Guam people moved to the U.S., but I know a lot of Filipinos ended up being
Chamorros were the indigenous in Guam, and but I think because of the naval bases that were there, right? So like all the military that came from all over the states, they're on a small island, so like they bring everything from the mainland to the islands, and through the base, right? And large population, like people on the island are like military from the mainland.
I'm curious to know, like, and today, the way that the culture has evolved, these dances that now have become codified, like calling it street dance, and it all falls under this umbrella, which includes like hip hop, locking, like breaking, And then the club dances that were born out of the
Yeah,
clubs,
yeah.
like whacking and house, et cetera, et cetera. And you grew up at a time where you're just seeing this, teaching yourselves, learning where you can learn it from, and then now it's become a whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, how does that feel?
It feels surreal, actually.
Yeah.
And I was, everything that I loved as a teen, like roller skating was another one of them. And I picked up roller skating again over the last 3 years. And just like the dance culture and the music of the era that was just like our heyday. So it's all like the synchronicity of it all coming together at the same time. The roller skating, the music, and the dance it feels, it feels weird, but like I'm enjoying it. I feel like I'm kind of like reliving my teens again, but in a more elevated way, because I can take lessons now. It's not just winging it, although that was fun. Like, technique and all this that is so alive today and thriving in the city. Like I'm finding out, and I know that I'm only scratching the surface of like the dance scene now that I'm re-entering and taking classes and just meeting people like yourself, and it feels amazing.
Yeah.
It feels amazing, and I'm so grateful that like I'm still at a time and an age where like my mind and my body allows it.
Yes.
So I'm just embracing it all.
Well, that's how you're gonna stay young. Okay.
Keep it moving.
Exactly.
Move it or lose it. Yes.
That's it. Well, I'd love to know, like, now it's so battle, competition, heavy. Like, those are one of the main ways in which we gather around this art form. Like, what was battle culture like? Did it even exist when you were coming up? Like, what did that look like for you?
We would battle, but it felt more like what you guys call today is like a cipher. So it wasn't intense, although we wanted to win the battles. But there weren't so many crews that like we were all always the same people. Like we knew who was in the scene and who danced with who. And even though we had crews, it wasn't like you just stayed with that crew. There's a contest happening at this club and you're usually dancing with this crew, but we spread the love. Like we danced together. We would collaborate and, not just stay with one. People would move around. And I think one of our friends said, it was funny because my cousin Ferdinand was a dancer, and they said, he wasn't with the crew. He was a freelancer. He would just go to all the crews and like learn a routine for this competition, and
we call those free agents now.
Free agents, okay.
I'm just gonna. Your hair is on your mic.
Okay,
that's okay. So then, was it within like a club context that these things would happen?
Yeah. So for me, like it first started, there used to be underage clubs. So, teenagers could go dance and experience like nightlife without the bar part of it. So there was a club in Surrey called Bumpers, and this would have been probably in 1982-ish. We would go there and just battle with each other. There wasn't even a time yet that we actually had crews. We all hung around together, but we would just kind of like all cipher in a circle because there's dancers from East Van, like going to Surrey was a trek.
Yeah.
First of all, we had to find someone with a car, all pitch in for gas. There was no SkyTrain. Yeah, there was no SkyTrain. And taking a bus there, I don't think the buses ran that late.
Yeah.
Or if they did, like we'd be waiting for like an hour or two to get to Surrey. So, when somebody finally like was able to get a car and drive, we would all go together, bunch of East Van kids. And then there would be like dancers in Surrey that we wouldn't normally see. So they would be at Bumpers. And then that's the only way we really got to know like other dancers because, no social media, like we didn't phone, like you just saw people real time when you met them. Yeah. Like that's the only real time that you meet. Other than that, it's, and it was just once in a while. So, you had crews in Vancouver, downtown, New West, Surrey. And the only time you would ever really meet is like after we grew out of the teen clubs, we would go to like the adult clubs, even though we were still underage. But what happened is that time is breaking was new. Like adult dancers were starting to hear about what is this breaking thing. So promoters that had clubs decided that they were going to like have contests. So the only breakers were kids, right? Because all the other dancers were already of age.
Yeah.
You know, the lockers and the poppers, they came from the disco era. So they were already established street dancers that were not teenagers anymore, but they were there. But breaking was brand new. So they wanted to kind of, I guess, introduce breaking to entertain the adults that were there. So they opened the doors to the clubs for kids on one day a week, and I think it was Monday nights at Casablanca's. So we would all trek to Casablanca's, and they had like a back room where all of us could stay and practice. It was like a dance floor and a bar.
Yeah.
So we would practice and stay over there until it was time for the contest. Then they would call us out like group by group, and then we'd go on the floor and do our routine, and then the next group would come up, and then so, yeah, that was kind of like a weekly thing. And,
wow.
And a lot of times it was, you know, the same crews.
Yeah.
But, you know, new crews were always, you know, coming up and developing. And
How did your crew form?
My crew formed, so I danced with a lot of B-boys. Like I was a B-girl at heart first, before anything. I was breaking and learning with the B-boys, but there were no B-girls. Like there wasn't anybody that I ever met that was doing that. So eventually there were some older girls that, you know, they were wavers, poppers, lockers, and they were like in their 20s. I was 15 at the time, and they said, you know, you want to join us? And so I said, sure. Like two other Pinays, two other Filipinas.
Yeah.
Maria and Apples. I don't know where you are, but hi, if you ever see this, I miss you guys. So they would pick me up and we would practice. And so we had a female crew called Scorpio.
Yeah.
And
why Scorpio? Were you all Scorpios?
We were all November.
Yeah.
They were both Scorpios. I'm a Sagittarius, but you know.
Close enough.
The kid in the crew had no say.
Yeah.
So we were called Scorpio, and like, one of our routines was to the song Scorpio. So that would be like our like signature song.
That's
how
so
it
cool.
started. Yeah.
How does it feel to see how things have evolved in terms of like, I guess, a more like, not, I wouldn't say more organized, it's just organized in a different way, you know, like you're having these contests, and then the last time we saw each other was at Red Bull BC1, the breaking competition battle that happened.
Oh my God.
And that was the Vancouver qualifier. Shout outs to Arthur Storm.
Yes, thank you, Arthur, for the invite. That was my first Red Bull event, and it's kind of like, when we stopped breaking, when we stopped dancing, which was probably like by the time I graduated, we kind of stopped doing like the crew dancing and everything else. We continued to go to the clubs, even though we were still underage, but we had already been in that lifestyle for a while, and the club dances were coming out, right? So we were just all like learning all the new, you know, MC Hammer, you know, Salt and Pepper, all that came out, right?
So it's like New Jack Swing era.
Yeah, New Jack Swing. And so we kind of transitioned, like kind of left breaking and just partied with the club dances. So going to like the Red Bull, I knew they existed. I'd see them online and all that kind of stuff, but it just felt amazing. Like the energy was amazing. To watch all the B girls, I was kind of jealous because I was like, I wish.
We all saw Grand Monk. We all saw
yes,
Grand Monk.
I know. She lit my fire. She lit my fire. I was like, oh my God, it's possible.
Yeah.
Look at, I
think
couldn't
she's
stop
in the
screaming.
same like generation as you know.
Yeah,
like they mentioned Grand Monk. Shout out.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I turned 58 this year.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a comeback from when I'm 60.
There's 100% a comeback here and now.
It was amazing. I couldn't stop screaming for Grand Monk, and me and my daughter, she was like, "Mom, you can do that." I'm like, "Don't tempt me."
Why not? You know?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, she was amazing, and that made me so happy. And it made me so happy to see like the B girls, and I've been introduced to like the scene and meeting some of the B girls now, and they're so amazing and friendly and like embracing, you know, like I can't believe how amazing the community is. I mean, I can believe it, but it's just, it feels so good. It's so nice. And everybody that I've ever met is so like, you know, I'm surprised they like want to even hear our stories.
Oh,
you know what?
my gosh. You know,
because it lives in our brain, and it's been there for so long, and it's kind of like life just kind of passes by, and we all like think, wow, those were really good times. Until we like voiced it, and like people were interested and wanted to know. And when we got together and did that panel, right?
I was just gonna mention that.
And then I reached out to them, like some of the B-boys that like I can remember and I knew how to find. When we saw each other again, and when we were talking about it, like we couldn't, like we were just so happy. Like we were just reliving, we were remembering things that I didn't remember, that somebody else remembered, and it just like blew our minds, and we were just like, such a good feeling to reminisce. And I wish we had like video at that time, or even pictures. Like even pictures are rare, because like what teenager back then carried around a camera? That was Dad's job for family gatherings. Like we didn't take pictures. It wasn't even on the radar. We just lived, right? And as much as I wish we had something, right, to look back on, it's also kind of like, it makes it more beautiful in a way that it only lives in our mind. I have the pictures in my head, you know, and that's where it stays, right? We can describe it, but the true memories are were lived in real time without capturing or thinking about what it looks like to capture or anything. It was just in the moment, present, no editing, no rewinding, no nothing.
No curating. It
no
was
curating.
Just as is.
If you did a move that you were working on and like you did it and you only did that one time and nobody saw, nobody will ever see it.
But you felt it. You felt it come out your body.
And it didn't matter to us because that was our reality, right? Like it's not like we could fast forward and think, geez, I wish I had an iPhone that I could like have recorded that on. So it was all just truly just a different way of thinking, like a different mentality that will never be the same again, right? Because, you know,
culture has evolved, technology has evolved.
So we'll never go back to the days where you can't capture anything in real time. So as long as we have our memories still. But it's good that maybe that, you know, we're sharing it now. So, you know, when the time comes.
This is the archive. And speaking of the archive, I really want to shout out Jojo, Zolina, Kristen, aka Catchflow, Natasha Gorey, and Jarek. I'm not sure who else was part of organizing that event.
There was the We Vancity, I wrote it down because I didn't want to remember. We Vancity Roots. And so, Jojo, Arthur, Kim, Kirsten, and Brader.
Yes. They organized an event back in December called Vancity Ultimate Jam. And it was the coming together of like our OGs. Because for most of us, you know, growing up in Vancity or growing up within the street and club dance community, as far back as we can go is like Jarek and Jarek's generation, Jarek Kizon. And then Jarek had always heard about people who'd be like, oh, the way that you did this kind of reminds us of this B-boy. And he's like, who are these? Where's this lore from? Like, who are these legends that like I've never met, I've never seen, and we don't know how to contact or find? And then, you know, our OG got to meet his OGs, which was amazing. I also want to quickly shout out the crews that were present, and that way we also have it on record. There was the Dance Masters, which included Ferdinand, Bisilda as well.
Not me on the Dance Masters.
Or sorry, Ferdinand,
Arminda, and Hey and JG. And there was Alan Wu, who I want to mention his name because although we don't know where he is, and but he was actually like one of the dancers that really like created a community. He was older than us, so he could like you know, go to the promoters and say you should have contests, and you know, and he was just really like, he was theatrical in the way he danced. So a street dancer, as far as like, he always had a gimmick, he always had a theme, you know, that kind of thing. So Alan Wu.
Dance Masters, were they also Van or?
New West.
New West, okay. And then we got Dance Force. So Alan Dobbs, Richard Leacock, Ari Marin,
East Banners,
Scorpio, Bisilda, Maria Isabel, and also Arminda.
Yeah, she was part of Dance Masters, and
Okay.
there were the Dynamic Jammers, who were the
Yes.
Filipino boys from New West.
Yeah, Verdon, Johnny, Jojo.
And I know that there's more. I
Yeah.
just can't remember all your names, but
Yeah.
I remember you.
Yes. And then Tough, the Ultimate Force.
Yes.
So Emmett, Andre, Mark, and Lonnie.
Yes. And Andre still dances, so Andre Diamond. So maybe some of the dancers like today might know, have heard of his name. He ended up teaching for a long time. He went to Asia. And I'm not sure which country, but yeah, he stayed there for a long time, and he was teaching, locking, popping, ticking, all that kind of stuff.
That's
And,
so cool.
Yeah.
And now he's based in California.
Yeah, he's originally from California. I think he
Yeah.
might have moved back to California, but
Yeah.
he spent a lot of time teaching in Asia. And sometimes when I see, those videos of like the amazing lockers and the dancers in Asia, I'm wondering, I wonder if Andre Diamond had anything to do with that, actually.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yo, that event was very significant for the community to meet all of you and for all of you to also meet us.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people have moved on from the culture and are, doing life things, but like it felt like such a connective moment and a historical moment.
Wow. It felt so good to us as well. Like we were just kind of a little bit like amazed, I guess, and like they're coming to listen to us. That's how it felt. Yeah. So it was like I can appreciate it though, and like we're like grateful that you guys want to hear our stories. And it also, like I said, like it gives us so much joy to like look back and relive, because really it was like some of the best years of our lives. I think I can speak for all of us when I say that. Like it was just, an amazing time.
Well, what I love that you said before was that like the passion has never left you, and I think anyone who falls in love with what we can call under the umbrella of like hip hop culture, but really it expands beyond that. Like the best way I can describe it is like some sort of like there's an essence and a heart and a soul to this flavor, and it has literally just impacted the world, and it's like diasporic in nature in terms of like how other cultures and communities have adopted it, adapted with it, and then created new expressions or nuances or flavors that is so unique and specific to their cultures. And it's like literally worldwide, and it's a language that speaks to so many. And it's one of those things where you love it. And in my lifetime, without even trying, like like hip hop has found me. The culture has found me. Like even going to the Philippines, to my parents' like motherland island in a small town. What was it called? It was in Aklan, the province of Aklan. My family is from Panay Island, and we're just there for a festival called Ati-Atihan, which is a whole other thing. And then we just hear like, oh yeah, there's like a cipher going on in the town square. There's gonna be an MC battle and a breaking battle, and then I go, and it's like packed, and hearing people rap in Bisaya language, which is like, whoa, hip hop spoken through these other, like this other language, essentially.
Yeah, I know. I listen to hip hop and rap in other languages, like I follow, some Filipino rappers like MOARRR Beats and
MOARRR Beats.
Also some like Russian rappers, and I'm just like, whoa, like I don't know what they're saying, but it's so good. Yeah, you're right. It's just like it's worldwide now. And I remember when like it didn't even play on the radio here. So
it's come a long way.
It's come a long way, yeah.
Do you think that, now this is an interesting thought, do you think that if growing up you saw like B-girls or dancers that like have a career in this the way that a lot of our friends do now, like would that have...
Yeah, dance would have been my life. And if it was a different time, so, I don't have any regrets, but like when I say I'm envious, it's because when at that time in my life when I just like the passion or the love for dance clicked for me, it wasn't something that anybody I knew like took dance classes. You know, I thought dance classes were just like, you know, Arthur Murray Ballroom, you know, that kind of thing. Like there weren't any other ones that I heard of. So the concept of even taking a dance class wasn't there. I always had a dream of like I would have to move to LA to be a dancer. So even when I was in grade 7, that was like a thought because there was a show called Solid Gold.
Okay.
And so it was like a variety show, you know, singers would come on and, you know, they would have the break between and there would be like the dancers that come on and do their routines. And I would always think, I really want to be a Solid Gold dancer. That's what I want to do with my life. But in order to do that, I have to run away, move to LA to follow my dance dream, you know?
Yeah.
So it always has been like that fire. And if it was available, like, you know, if it was something that was easy to access, I think, yeah, for sure. Like I would have like, who knows? I would have just danced.
Yeah.
Just danced.
Oh, as somebody who grew up without the internet, you know, pre-internet, pre-social media, what does that feel like for you to see that and the emergence of that and how that impacts the way we socialize?
Yeah. It's amazing because it makes the world that much smaller. I'm able to visualize, see things that I would never ever be able to see. People from across the world dancing or skating. But at the same time, it's like overwhelming, you know, like I want to try everything. And so like my mind is already like, oh my gosh, I got to do this. I want to try that. I want to try that. So like the more access you have to see things, it just triggers for me more like I got it. Now I want to try that. There's so much time and energy that I have. But I think that, I mean, it's good. Like it's good. You have to manage. I think you really have to manage your consumption though, because like just being present, like you said, like I didn't know that ever had to become a skill, but now it has to become a skill, right? It was just the way of life. Like, okay, let me learn how to be present. But before it was just that. There was no other way. Yeah. So there's like, you know, pros and cons, you know. The exposure to so many different things that you would never have come across is amazing. But at the same time, you know, because I lived in the time where there was no internet, you know, so I really missed that time. You know, the simplicity of it all. Yeah. And that's something that, even if I tried, you know, it'll never be that. Yeah. So I do miss that.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I feel like, I mean, I didn't grow up with the internet until I was, I think like 10 or 11 is when I remember clicking the dial-up, you know, and blocking the phone line. But prior to that, and like being a kid in the 90s, growing up in East Van, and actually like playing outside, organizing our own games, but more so, and this is what I'll always be grateful about growing up Filipino, and that our culture is so celebratory by nature. Yeah. You know, like
parties all the time.
Parties, karaoke, lots of food, multi-generations,
open door policy, everybody come in. You're a friend of a friend, come on in.
Or like you can always just drop by. You know, if it's a bad time, then just go, but it's always okay to just check in, you know. But like growing up in that time, and the reason for dancing really came from like, it's a good song, it's making my body do this, here's who's in front of me, like let's just dance, like let's boogie, you know. And it's so wild to me to see with the rise of social media, which brought a lot of like arguably more connection, it also arguably brought a lot of disconnection. Because now the reason why the young people specifically are dancing, it's like for a different purpose. You know, it's not necessarily like to be present and to like connect with who's in front of you. It's like, let's make a video so that it feels so good to get all the likes and the comments, which we all love. It's dopamine hits for sure, you know? and then have this thing like dancing for this future intended purpose.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, or the other opposite thing, which is like the battle and the competition. I've been having a lot of thoughts on this because this is like an area of research that I'm heading into for my school program.
Okay, cool.
I'm doing an alternative MFA in experience design, and like I'm really curious about dance as transformation, but also the way that dance has transformed and how and why we participate in it. And when things have become either like focused on this like I guess for the hits, the clout, the internet clout, and then the other aspect where it's like, you know, for the competition and the battle. And I think having goals and having something to work towards it has so many juicy lessons, right? To work towards being ready to battle.
Yeah.
That there's so much in that. It's
Yeah.
not fully a crossing of a threshold once you get there.
Yeah.
You know, and then to be witnessed by your community, by elders, etc. But what is it like? How does what happens to the culture then when it no longer is about this like purity that you spoke of, that you got to grow up in, and why I'm like I glorify what you got to grow up in.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's always going to be evolving. It's always going to feel different, right? And through the different stages of my life, like the different, when I've entered like different kinds of dance at different stages of my life. So as a teenager, I was breaking and street dancing, and then you know, life happens. You know, you get married, you have kids, and you know, don't really focus on what you want to do. But just like the chapters move on, right? There's different
you get
chapters.
Your second life once your kid is independent.
So what I found also was, I was at, get my words out.
That's okay.
My daughter was in high school, so she was a little bit more independent, and I wanted to get back into dance. You know, I danced at parties. You know, hip hop is always going to be there. You know, that's what our go-to. You know, anytime at the party, we're all hip hop dancing, doing our old school dances. But I always wanted to try salsa dancing. So when I started taking salsa, I found that, you know, a lot of people were in a transition stage of their life. So say you're kind of like middle-aged, and, you know, you're starting anew after maybe like a broken relationship or being single for the first time in a long time. That's what I found, like a different kind of community as well. And I found that we all had that same commonality in that we were all fully grown adults, not really dancing, but finding something that we wanted to do for ourselves because we're in a transition part of our life, and it was a common theme. And so it's something that both men and women were doing and meeting up. So it was like kind of like the demographic was like already been married or kids, you know, kind of like in your 30s or your 40s. And so that was a different like dance experience for me. So going into something like totally new, I always loved the music, and you know, I loved the dance as well, and learning that and going out and just being vulnerable, meeting people, dancing with different people, and not having to associate it with like a club, like, okay, you know, we're going home, you know, I mean, you know, like anything other than that, right? Just social dancing.
Yes.
That was like another kind of dance experience that I had. And it actually brought my daughter and I closer together because she's just a natural dancer. And she listened to salsa music growing up as well, because in our household, like my partner is Puerto Rican, so played salsa music a lot. And she loved it. And so she was 15 at the time. And I said, you should come to a class with me. Anyways, she ended up loving it. She just dove right into it. Even more so than I did, but it was something that we shared together. Like, you know, I have my teenage daughter who wants to spend time with me. Like, that was like number one.
Yeah. Aw.
And so that's when we would go to congresses together. And then she took to it so much that she wanted to even like study even more. So she went to New York and she studied with Yamule, which is like the epitome of like salsa salsa troops. And they wanted her to stay. They wanted her to stay in New York, but she was 16 at 15, 16. She was too young. She didn't want to like leave me for that long. So, yeah, that was just like kind of like another stage of dance.
And then after that, where did you go?
So after that, I was into salsa and Latin dances for like 7 years. So it was something that I could do by myself. Like as a single woman, I could go to any salsa dance and have fun, enjoy the evening. I could, when I go on a vacation, look up the salsa community there, and I could go by myself and know that I was going to have a good time and meet people and make friends. So after a long stint of like Latin dancing, I just kind of dabbled a little bit here and there. I like took reggaeton classes. I found some people in the hip hop community. I took privates with Natasha, and then I just started taking classes, and I think kind of different places. But right now I'm taking classes with Jojo at his studio. So I've discovered like heels and hip hop, and I just started locking classes with Julian, and so yesterday was my second locking class.
Yeah. Do you remember what you learned?
A little bit.
Yeah. Do you remember what it's called? The moves or whatever?
Yeah. No, he said the moves, but I don't remember what the moves are called. Yeah. But what was like amazing to me was after like we all walked together to Robson Square to lock together, and I literally did that when I was 15. And I was there again, and I was like, oh my God, this feels so weird. It looks the same, just 40 years later. And with the group of people that we were with, like it was so much fun. It was like really just like, dance like no one's watching. It was just fun and freeing.
Especially the locking community. They're just like a silly bunch.
Yeah, it was just like, we were doing like ciphering in the middle, and like I've still like get nervous. But,
for sure.
Yeah. But just getting back out there again and doing it, and just like just letting go and not thinking too much. So I generally don't think too much about it. But
Other than Robson Square, what were the spaces that you would dance in?
Practices would be there was like a wrestling mat room at Britannia. So since Britannia was a community center, it was always open, like in the evenings and after schools and on the weekends. So that's where a lot of people, came to practice, I guess, the moves that they needed to be safe with. Yeah. Other than that, it was like my house was kind of like a hub. My brother had friends, and they all danced, and me and my cousin. And so my family was like really, we had an open door policy. So if there was nowhere to go, we'd be in our backyard. Yeah. Or somebody else's house. We just kind of like gather around. Back then, gallivanting was really like what we did, right? We didn't have a car. Yeah. We just like Saturday morning, just walk around, like go to so-and-so's house, walk to so-and-so's house, and whoever whose ever house fit the bill that day the best to like practice, that's where we would go. Or we'd go to like the elementary school, Queen Victoria, anywhere really.
I also remember you guys mentioned Templeton was a spot.
Because they were dancers. My brother went to Templeton, so he was a breaker too. Right. And so he had, friends, and they would break dance at Templeton. And I think there was in 1984, there was the theater club or something at Templeton. They did a play called Video 84.
Oh,
and,
that sounds interesting.
Yeah, I think my brother did a little breaking cameo there on that. I don't know if it's on it's probably somewhere. Someone in Vancouver has it on VHS, I'm sure. Yeah. But there is stuff out there, because there were events that were captured for TV. And I think there was a big contest at the P&E called Breakdance 84. And this is something that we talked about at the panel.
I love that people were like, did I dream that?
Yeah, was it real?
Like, there's no documentation. Like, I think I made that up.
From Don's like, did that really happen?
Yeah.
Like, yes, it did.
Yeah, tell us about it.
So it was a big contest. Breakdancing was like, people were hearing about it. Kids were doing it in high schools. And the P&E was open. So during the summer, it was like August 1984, Super Soccer, which was one of those sports drinks back then, and they sponsored it. And so they advertised it for a while. It was a big contest. They had breakers from New York come and judge it.
Yes.
So there were breakers from like the Rock City crew and the New York City Breakers. They were there as judges. So they hung around the city for a while too, because while it was going on.
Did you get to get down with them?
I didn't. So that was the summer that my family took a family vacation to Hawaii.
Okay.
So I wasn't even here, and that was heartbreaking for me.
Oh my God.
I have to go to Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it was captured. Like there were TV cameras there, and the crews that we talked about, they were there repping, and there were crews from Seattle that came up.
Oh my gosh, I'm so curious. Who from Seattle? Was Massive Monkeys around then?
I don't know. I don't even remember the names.
I don't know that. Yeah.
But it's funny because my generation, we're not very good at sleuthing. We were like, we gotta find out what TV station was there and who we can contact. So I had sent some emails out through CTV and CBC or whatever, trying to get to their archive department, but no one ever answered me.
Really?
But then one of Dawn's friends had a contact, and during the panel, he said, all we have to give this guy is the date of the contest, and that they could look it up. So none of us could remember the dates. We weren't even sure, was it really 1984? So when we put that out to you guys, the audience came back, and you guys did, your generation, you did your sleuthing, and somebody found the advertising, flyer from the Woodward's flyer.
Oh, wow.
And it was pictures of the breakdancing, and they had this whole article about breakdance slang, right? So for those teaching us fresh means amazing. It's not a vegetable. We're not talking about vegetables.
That is so funny.
Yeah, so it had a whole dictionary of hip hop slang, and it had promo pictures, with some of the Rocksteady crew, and then posing beside the car, which was the grand prize for the contest.
What car?
Oh gosh, I don't even know what it was, but I think Tough won it.
Wow.
And
the Ultimate Force crew.
Yeah, the Ultimate Force crew.
Well, how do you give a car to a whole crew?
I know.
That's funny.
I think they just had to sell it because, and cash it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they were able to find it. So hopefully, with that, that info, August 27th, 1984, someone hopefully is on it.
You found out the date.
Yeah. So now, whoever it is that needed the date, there's the date, August 27th, 1984. CBC or CBS, or I don't know who. We think it was CBC at the time. Archive. So
feels like something CBC would be down for.
Yeah. Anyways, that breakdance contest at the Peony, that iconic one, is out there somewhere, and then you'll get to see the Seattle crews that came up for that. And
what's crazy is that's a huge venue. So the fact that was full in 1984, that's incredible.
Yeah. Oh. It was big, and by that time, I would say by 1985, every high school probably had breaking crews because it was just everywhere.
It was everywhere, and people wanted to get in on it. And like I said, it's infectious.
Yes. Yeah.
So have you always lived then in East Van?
After I got married in 1990, my ex-husband, he was from Chicago, so we did move to Chicago after Justine was born.
Okay.
For about just a couple of months, and ended up coming back here. And then I think I tried, there was a short stint that I moved to Surrey, but I always come back to East Van. I don't think I'll ever move from East Van. It's just home is home.
Yeah.
And, even though the rent is crazy, which is crazy to me because the history of everybody wanting to leave East Van,
What do you mean?
When I was in high school, Commercial Drive was, all the storefronts were newspaper, closed off. There were no thriving businesses. There was maybe like the barber shop that was there forever and like a couple of corner stores. But as far as like all those windows that you see along Commercial Drive were
Boarded up.
Boarded up. They were like abandoned buildings. So
Wow.
commercial was like dead. Me and my friends used to be able to roller skate, zigzag down Commercial Drive, both directions, no traffic. Like just, that was our rink. We would, when they opened the 7-Eleven on 12th Avenue,
Yes.
that we were like in
Excited.
heaven. We were like, oh my God, we have access to Slurpees. We have access to Slurpees. So we would just roller skate to 7-Eleven or get our Big Gulp or a Slurpee and roller skate back. That's all we did. So for the girls in like, you know, our neighborhood gang.
Yeah. Barcada.
Our barcada. We had, we all had roller skates, the girls, and all the boys had BMXs.
Yes.
So, you know, when we'd hang out as a big bunch, you know, the girls meet the boys, what are we going to do today? Like, they just, like, we'd roll around, hitch onto their BMXs, like, you know, drive downtown, ride downtown, go through Stanley Park, you know, like, all the while, like, not drinking water. I think we might buy one, and those big freezies.
Yeah.
One of us would buy a big freezie, and we'd share the freezie. And then power on, you know.
Oh my God.
And keep going through the day. I don't know how, you know, we didn't even feel ourselves. Like drinking water wasn't even a thing.
No, it's all about sugar. Fructose, fructose.
Yeah.
What landmarks of East Van are still here?
The Continental Cafe is still there.
Okay.
And the one across the street.
Like, I guess of places that you remember that are iconic to you.
The Italian cafes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were still there. They survived even when, you know, everything else was closed. Like, we didn't even have Metrotown.
Really?
No.
Was that built in the 90s?
I don't know when it was built,
Yeah.
but we had like, the only mall was Pacific Center Mall, so we would go downtown.
Okay.
And that's why Granville Street like was the only thing that, you know, all the teens would just walk up and down Granville Street. Going to see a movie was the thing to do. And breakdancing was the thing to do. So breakers, we would bring our cardboard to Granville or like break at Robson Square just to hang out, just to have somewhere to go. Like that was the venues that we made for ourselves. Because like we were just, you know, we wouldn't even really go anywhere out of Vancouver, pretty much like East Van.
Yeah.
If a friend of ours, if their parents decided to, like I remember my friend, her parents decided to buy a house in Burnaby. We were so sad. We're like, oh my God, we're never going to see you again. Like, you're moving to Burnaby. We'll never see you again.
That's so funny.
Yeah, because even buses, right? Like even buses were like not hard to come by, but unless you were on a route, going to Burnaby just seemed like just too much of a trek.
Yeah. Was Granville Street still like an entertainment district back then?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was.
because they had the Commodore, and there was the bowling alley there.
Yeah.
And then
the movie theaters. So like there were like more movie theaters open than there are now.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just pretty much like where it was. And it wasn't closed off at that time, so it was still open. And
now I have a question about the East Van Cross. When did you first start seeing that? And then now we see it iconicized, immortalized.
Yeah.
There's rumor that it might move because a building is blocking it. I'm like sad about that because I thought it was so sick riding the SkyTrain, and then you pass the East Van Cross. I'm talking on Clark Drive and like 6.
yeah.
Yeah. When do you first remember seeing the East Van Cross around?
To the youngest age that I can remember. It was carved into like every like bus stop bench, like totem poles. It was carved everywhere. And it was even like, it was more carvings than actual graffiti.
Interesting.
Like, yeah, it was, that's where I remember seeing it pretty much like on all the bus stop seats, East Van, carved into it.
Because I can't verify this fully, but this is from like what knowledge and research I've done.
Yeah.
Like the East Van Cross was taken from Dogtown, right? Do you know about this?
No, what I grew up knowing about it is it was first a sign created like by the Hells Angels.
Oh.
And so like they were the ones who were like, that's them, that's their mark, right? And they kind of claimed it. Like nobody would ever walk around with it because like, you're just inviting trouble or whatever.
Right. Associating to a gang.
Yeah. But then, I try to describe to people when they say like East Van pride, like what is it? And I think it's just comes from earlier, like those early days, like when that was, it stood for, it stood for turf, right? And that's how they marked it, right? It was East Van turf. And so eventually, if you're from East Van, then that's your turf, right? So it kind of went hand in hand. And I think, like, I don't know, I've heard stories along the way that, they didn't like it when people, so I was surprised when I saw that because I was like, because to me, growing up here, it was always taboo to use that specifically.
Unless you were associated.
Yeah. And even to this day, like I would buy, East Van swag or whatever, and there's a little store that I would go to that had it, but they would always get broken into and vandalized because of that, because they were showing in their window that, and the cops would come and like they'd have to say, I would just advise you, like, this is going to keep happening unless you just like take this merch off, because there's people out there that are very territorial about it, and they
you could be welcoming trouble essentially.
Yeah. So it's like there's still people out there that really feel like ownership of it, where a lot of like people who grew up in East Van for many decades, especially going back to the 60s, it's kind of like an emblem of like the East Van that we know,
right?
The East Van before it became like a hub for anything, right? Before people wanted to live here, when people were like moving out. So that was our pride. It's like, we're from East Van, even if you don't like it and you don't like where we're from and you don't like it here, like we're proud of it and we live here. And this is our hood, and we inject that pride into it. So when I say like East Van pride, like that's what I feel behind it. It's like it's happening now, and it's popular and expensive, and it's a hub now, but it goes back to when it was just being dissed all the time. Especially like when even in high schools, like when an East Van school has a game with a West Van school, like boom, like there's fire.
Yeah,
right?
fully.
Like, they don't want to come over here.
Yeah.
And
it's not
we
just
knew
a game, there could be a fight.
Yeah. Like, oh my God. It's like a movie, right? Yeah. Back in the day, but it was true. Parking lot after the game.
I think my high school era, we were just coming off of the tail end of that, where like there was like some serious gang wars that were happening, but like the whole East Side versus West Side was such a thing that they implemented a program called I want to say it was called Sister to Sister, like school thing, where like for 2 days, an East Van high school, like you would go, like you would sign up for this program. I did it for the free lunch. I'm always down for the free food. / my high school best friend was like, oh my gosh, like I want to meet cute boys in like the West Side, right? So it would be that you would get buddied up with someone from a West Side school. They would spend day 1, day 2, like 2 days in your high school, and you'd show them around, and and then we would go to a West Side school and spend 2 days there. That's my high school best friend being like, I want to meet cute boys. And then we would have a luncheon together and talk about our learning.
Really?
Yeah, to try to like bridge the gap and build the divide and like end the like essentially these fights and wars that would happen.
Wow.
And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean this happened, I guess that would have been the early 2000s, like just at the turn of the millennium.
But even like the fact that they had to do that to recognize, like it was prevalent.
Yeah,
it
was a real thing.
Yeah,
with real consequences.
Yes.
And what was illuminating was the West Side student who we were partnered with was like, oh, you guys might not have so much of a strong focus on academia, but you have so many fun activities and sports all the time. Like from the morning, recess, lunch break, and after school, we're always having intramurals and sports and things that like help keep our East Side kids out of trouble, you know?
Yeah.
But then when we were there, Because we were Asian, people were all like, "Are you guys the exchange students?" We're like, no. And then B, it was like there was a stronger focus on academics. Like it felt like, do you remember mini school or like it was honors programs?
Yeah.
Like there was like a separate thing that if you were more intellectually smarter, you got into a different kind of like social studies or English or mathematics class. And there it felt like that was the standard. It was like everyone was in mini school or honors program classes.
Really?
The way that they were functioning and what they were studying in their class. I was like, oh, this feels kind of advanced.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was interesting.
That is interesting. And like, that was a good idea for them to do that. It's probably what we needed too, but I don't think it was like, anybody was really into like bridging any gaps.
You're like, no, Rep East Van. I mean, that's really, thank you for sharing that story, by the way. That was really illuminating to hear about the history of East Van Cross. And like when I'm talking about Dogtown, I'm thinking of like Lords of Dogtown. I'm thinking about the skateboarding movement that emerged in Los Angeles and California. And that is how they tagged it, you know, DOG, TOW.
They might have got it from that, right?
You know, and but also it's making me think of just like how symbols evolve its meaning over time. Like wearing a red bandana or a blue bandana, and if you grew up in that era where like you don't wear that unless you are from those gangs, you know, to then now seeing kids on the street wearing every color of bandana, and it's just speaking of which, it's just fashion, you know?
It's so funny because I still like, I think about that. Like if I have a bandana, I'm like, I don't want red or blue. Like, just in case. Yeah. Like, so that I mean, it sticks with me.
Still, Well, and the fact that like the East Van Cross now has really become such an emblem.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's why I feel proud of it when I see it on the SkyTrain. But it's interesting to think of like who out there really look at that and they're just like they're shaking their heads.
There's still people mad out there. Don't come for me, sorry.
I didn't make the sign. It's there. But oh man, this hour went by so fast, Bisilda.
Has it been an hour?
Yeah, you were worried. You're like, I don't know if I have enough to talk about. And I'm like, you don't even know. This is gonna go by so fast. We're going to have so many cool things to talk about.
Oh my gosh. It's easy to talk to you. So,
and likewise, I love that we finally got this on record for the archive and that you were able to share your stories and like really illuminate like a lot of missing pieces that I feel, at least within the street dance and club dance community, we didn't have, you know, of those stories. And now we have really like the beginning, which is cool. You know. Yeah,
and I'm so happy that like through you and meeting like so many like awesome people in the scene now, that I get my second chance. Yes. And I'm just like reliving it, and and you guys are amazing.
Yeah. Well, and the community is at a place now, and the culture has like a history now where we have 4 generations. You know, and I forgot who said what about this, but like. When you really have that many generations existing, you really now are at a place where like a culture can thrive, you know, because you have history and knowledge keepers, and then you have the next generation. And there's just something so beautiful about like being in this era now and where I fit in, and I've talked about this a lot on the show, is like I'm in my tita era, I'm in my auntie era, where it's like living for the next gen, but I also feel this responsibility as well as like also keeping the stories of who came before us and honoring and giving flowers to those who came before us, and that like we continue to keep this alive.
I love that because I'm in my Lola era, so now it's just it's amazing.
Yeah. Aw. Well, thank you everybody who's tuned in.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, we brought treats. Couldn't even eat, couldn't even talk.
What do we got?
We're gonna end the show with cracking open these treats and eating them. These are pastries from Libya, actually. Have you been there?
No.
So speaking of Commercial Drive and what has evolved from these boarded up houses, One of them is a really amazing place that does, I mean, I think they're like Italian, future, current, contemporary, whatever. I'm just saying things out. Pastries that are so good. That one is the seasonal Danish, which is cherry blossom with a custard. Ooh. And then this one is called a mazzotti? We did not write that down. But it has a sweet cream and a brioche bun.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so these are fancy pastries. But yeah, Bisilda, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, appreciate everyone who's tuned in, who's watching the replay. We appreciate you. We've been broadcasting live on the unceded ancestral lands of the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations, what is colonially known as Vancouver, BC, and what we call Vancity. And specifically from us two, reppin' East Van all day.
All day.
All day, baby. All right. Peace, y'all. Later. Jamal.
Cheers.